Listen up, this is only going to take a minute. My name is Dylan Gallagher, founder of Emily Now. My goal is to provide practical and simple content entrepreneurs can use to increase the value of their business. My hope is that you'd be entertained and encouraged because let's face it, being an entrepreneur, it's not always easy. Sometimes it helps to discover what others are doing. So thanks for hanging out and let's get to it. Google and Facebook still use the three-word question that saved a $225 billion company in the 1970s. That's how we're going to start it out on this particular episode. And this is a great headline because this headline really fits into my line of thinking in terms of how do you solve problems and how do you do things better? How do you improve the results of your business, etc. So the article talks about back in the 70s, Procter and Gamble. They'd been struggling to come up with a product that could beat Irish Spring, which was a new and popular soap bar from Colgate. So Irish Spring kind of had like a green and white bar, and when you watch the television advertisements, they talked about, what does it say here? They couldn't figure out how to beat, so in the television commercial, the whole thing was refreshing, right? It was this whole idea of being refreshed, and Procter & Gamble couldn't figure out how to come up with a bar of soap to beat the Irish Spring bar of soap. So the three words, if you will, that led to the creative breakthrough was, how might we? So the question was, how might, I'm laughing because it's so typical, it's so obvious once you hear it, but yet it's this principle is just so hard to put into practice. And so, they started off trying to figure out, okay, how do we make a better green striped bar, right? I mean, that's typically the question. If you're in a competitive marketplace and you deliver a product or service, the question is, how do I do this better than anybody else? But then what they did is they redefined the problem. How might we, right? Just make sure, how might we? So as they redefined the problem, it led to the aha moment that really opened up, the solution. And so now, instead of trying to figure out how to make a better green striped bar, the problem was redefined as, how might we make a more refreshing bar? Because Irish Spring, refreshing, the commercials, they just really seem to own that idea. And so Procter & Gamble is having a hard time figuring out, how do we do something different than that? And so now, instead of saying, how do we make a better green and white striped bar, they said, how do we make a more refreshing bar? And if you remember, they debuted a soap bar called Coast, which was had swirly blue stripes in it, and it ended up beating Irish Spring in a blind test. And you can still find both of these soap bars in the marketplace today. And the $225 billion company is actually Procter & Gamble. So in the headline, these three words helped save a $225 billion company in the 70s. Those three words were, how might we? And I'll relay a little different story. I was chatting with an entrepreneur a couple months ago, and I'll never forget, this guy is so great. He, they'd run their business for about 9 years, and I asked a simple question. I said, well, what would it take to double your revenue? And the thought was, well, never really thought about that. I mean, we're just so busy trying to figure out how to keep our revenue levels where they are, let alone how to exceed them. I mean, you're just going to have to give me a couple days to come up with an answer. And sure enough, a couple days later, he did come up with an answer. And we got to work on putting some strategies in place to cement that new goal. But oftentimes as business owners, and I'm just because I say this stuff doesn't mean I'm any better at it than anybody else. But certainly I think it helps to hear about it and to hear people talking about it. And so this idea of how do we make, our product better than our competitors, it's just a hard question to answer, because I think it keeps you spinning in the same place. At the end of the day, you're not actually going to have a better product or service per se. You might have a better feature or a better function or Maybe you got like a better logo, but at the end of the day, you have to be able to define the underlying problem that you're trying to solve. And so in this particular case, as an example, with a bar of soap, it wasn't how do we make a better bar of soap? The question was, how do we make a more refreshing bar? And so all of a sudden that changes the context of the conversation. It changes the context of the ideas and the brainstorming that come out. And I guarantee you right now in your business, there's a problem that you're trying to solve, or a problem maybe you're not aware of that you're trying to solve. And you might be better served to maybe revisit the context for how you're setting up the problem. So, instead of, if you're in a really competitive marketplace, most of us are in very competitive marketplaces. Very few of us have the privilege of operating in a market that nobody is in and that we can define the rules for. So most of us are competing with somebody else in the marketplace. And so instead of trying to figure out how to make our product or service better, really what we need to be doing is figuring out, how do I do a better job at solving the problem that our product or service solves or addresses, if you will. And so, if you think about it at a very basic level, every business is delivering value to the marketplace. But what makes something valuable is how well it solves a problem for the user, for your customer. And so being able to define the problem means that you should be able to create more value for solving that problem, which means that you then should be able to come up with better answers than just trying to say, how do we make our product or our service better? The real question is, how do we do a better job at adding value? And a lot of times that's where some really cool ideas begin to come forward. And it's hard to execute, right? I mean, everybody knows that it's great to have ideas. Ideas are a dime a dozen, but the real businesses that get somewhere are the businesses that just don't stop executing. Every day, every week, every month, they're able to execute and hit their goals that they've defined. They don't walk around randomly. And so when you're asking a question, how might we add more value? How might we do a better job at solving this problem? Your business is going to be one of those businesses that continues to stand out in the market. So those are my thoughts today. I went a little bit longer, but thanks for hanging out, and we'll connect with you next time.